Hi everybody. So today's video is going to be about the topic of basically just how long should you work out? How much should you work out? And I think that this topic is one that we get a very certain sort of perspective from the fitness industry, particularly from the lifting end of the fitness industry, that is definitely a bit skewed. And we tend to have this perspective where it's like, okay, no pain, no gain, go all in, do everything you can, train for as long as you can. You've got to train for hours every single day. And I think that I want to push back against that a little bit just based on A, personal experiences, and B, some science, not science with a capital S, but some science. So I think that I want to start off with basically this video that I stumbled across on YouTube while I was just going about my day. It's a speech from Arnold Schwarzenegger in 2018. They call it the speech that broke the internet. That's a bit of a clickbaity headline, but you know, whatever. Here we go. Let's get started. I'm going to play the first couple of minutes of this for you.
Work your ass off. There is no magic pill. It drives me crazy to go to the gym. You read 1 hour a day. I went and worked out 5 hours a day, and I was working on construction. We have 24 hours a day. Organize your day. Work hard. I'm here to talk about success. I went to college. I went and worked out 5 hours a day, and I was working on construction. Because in those days in bodybuilding, there was no money. I didn't have the money for food supplements or anything. So I had to go to work. So I worked on construction. I went to college. I worked out in the gym, and at night, from 8 o'clock at night to 12 midnight, I went to acting class 4 times a week. So I did all of that. There was not one single minute that I wasted. And this is why I'm standing here today. At the age of 20, I went to London and I won the Mr. Universe contest as the youngest Mr. Universe ever. And it was because I had a goal. You see, if you don't have a vision of where you go, and if you don't have a goal where you go, you drift around and you never end up anywhere. 74% hate their job in America. The majority of people don't like what they're doing because they're really not doing it because they didn't have a goal and they followed this goal. They just aimlessly drift around, and then all of a sudden there's a job opening, so they get that job because you have to work. But then when you work, it's a chore. It's work. It's not fun. So if you think about only a quarter of the people really...
Okay. So, you know, you get the gist of this clip. Parts of this is not like the actual speech, you know, straight out. They cut pieces of it together, which is why some of those early statements are kind of weird and don't really make a lot of sense. So, you know, Arnold makes a lot of claims in this. He says, you know, okay, I worked a hard construction job. I worked out 5 hours a day. And then he immediately says, oh, I worked 8 p.m. to midnight, which is kind of like, okay, well, that's 4 hours a day. So there's some math problems in there. You know, he says that he was able to become, you know, a super great bodybuilder at a super young age. And it was in part because he had this vision and he had this drive. And so, you know, it was fun to him and he just wanted to do it. And we need to sort of find that same drive in our own lives. And in a general sense, like, all of that makes sense, right? Like, that's all true. You know, having vision, having passion, that's a great thing. And that will drive you to be much better than if you just, you know, don't. You know, if you have a crappy job, tons of people have crappy jobs that they hate. And, you know, that's pretty normal. But I want to kind of push back against, first of all, the claim that, you know, he worked out 5 hours a day. So first of all, like, there have been studies in which they sort of took people and they said, okay, how much did you work out this week? How much did you eat this week? And what they found was that those people that they questioned tended to vastly overestimate how much exercise they actually did and vastly underestimate how much they actually ate. And so you can tell that these people were probably sitting there thinking, how am I not losing weight? How am I not achieving my fitness goals? Whatever. When the reality was just that they were not quite doing the things that they thought they were. And this is really common in people in all kinds of ways. We're kind of really bad at self-reflecting unless we have some sort of objective way of writing it down and referring back to it later. If you asked me what I ate for breakfast 4 days ago, I have no fucking clue. Like, I could not tell you. You would have to, like, you could tell me and I would just be like, yeah, that, maybe that's right. I guess that's probably what I had for breakfast. And the reason for that is basically just that I don't care. Like, that's not information that I plan on keeping in my brain. It doesn't mean anything to me. And so, when they ask people to do things like remember diet stuff for dietary recall studies, to, remember how much exercise they did for sort of exercise recall stuff, that's notoriously bad. Like, it gets made fun of a lot in sort of the science end of fitness things, because, just trusting people to say what they actually did has never been reliable. It just doesn't work. It's not good data, because very often people want to remember the best parts about themselves, and they're always, we're always in our brains fashioning ourselves into the best possible version of ourselves in our memory. And so, we're always trying to paint a nice picture of ourselves, and we always say that we do better than we actually do, and the reality is often worse than the way that we remember things. That's just pretty normal. And that's the great value of being able to write things down. That's precisely why tracking your exercise, tracking your diet matters a lot and makes such a huge difference in terms of people actually getting results, because once you have actual data on what you are actually doing, that's when you can actually make informed choices about how to change things in the future. So, if you're actually writing down how much you're eating, then you can say, oh, okay, well, now that I actually know how much I'm eating, I can use that to make decisions about how to eat more, how to eat less. The same thing with exercise. You can make decisions about how to exercise more, how to exercise less, how to reorganize your schedule so that you're, accomplishing your goals and doing the things that you want to. So, Arnold Schwarzenegger probably isn't a liar, right? Like, he probably did work out a shit ton. And that is kind of what he's, communicating in this speech, and that makes sense, right? Like, he did. He was a guy in, his prime of his life. He was working out a crap ton, and he was, just like a guy who really liked doing this and had really great genetics for this and so on. And so, would I recommend, say, for example, that everyone in the world try and work out 5 hours a day? Well, obviously not, because a person is not going to be Arnold Schwarzenegger. Like, most of my clients are not going to be Arnold Schwarzenegger. They don't have the genetics that he has. And so, his level of training volume should not be taken as sort of a guideline or a recommendation for anybody else. The reason that he could handle something like, say, 4 or 5 hours of training is that, he had built up to it with lots of training previously. If you've worked out for an hour and then you've done a little bit more work and you've done a little bit more work and you've done a little bit more work, and then, just a few years down the line, you find that suddenly you're doing, super long workouts because you can tolerate that and because you adapt very well to workouts, then that's great for you and that's awesome. But that doesn't mean that I'm going to say, take a random client who comes into me or just some random guy on the internet and say, like, hey, you need to work out 5 hours a day or you're not going to see results or you're not going to become the next Arnold Schwarzenegger. Because the reality is that most of those people, if I took them and I tried to get them to do a 5 hour long workout, they might just crash and burn. Like, that's just not, like, that's just not, and even if they don't crash and burn, they're probably not going to be the next Arnold Schwarzenegger. They're probably not going to adapt to it as well as he did. So, I'm not saying that he's a liar. I'm not saying that, he didn't work out 5 hours a day. He probably did work out a lot. But, people brag about things all the time. And, like, that's it. That just is what it is. I have been through phases of my life where I worked out maybe 3 or 4 hours a day. it wasn't great. I hated it. It sucked. It happened that at the time that just I had a lot of time on my hands and I just really liked working out. And so I did it because I thought I needed to. I didn't get amazing results or anything. I didn't, it wasn't like it was the best training phase of my life. But, I did it for a time, but I don't do that anymore. And so, would I go around saying, oh, I work out a crap ton, I work out 5 hours a day? Well, yeah, sometimes I've worked out 5 hours a day. Most times I haven't. And so, do I think that Arnold Schwarzenegger worked out for 5 hours for every single workout he ever did? Probably not, But, again, that's just what it is. Like, it's a speech. He's sort of trying to simplify things for the audience. He's just trying to basically communicate that he has done a lot of work. And he has, right? So he's not, like lying in any general sense. He's just sort of presenting a version of himself that is, maybe a bit optimistic compared to sort of the reality of what people face day to day in their ordinary training schedules. So, the question, okay, do people actually train that much? Well, yes, people do actually train that much, right? Like I'm guessing that, most major athletes in the world, are training a crap ton like that in some way or another. Endurance athletes have to train a lot longer than strength athletes do. Simply because, that's just the name of the game. Like, they have to do super long workouts to prepare for even longer performances, like, a marathon or, like an ultra run or something like that. And so, that's just the name of the game when you're going to be an elite level athlete within that sport. That just is what it is. Now, do people react well to training a lot? Well, let's sort of go to my personal experiences as a coach and as as an athlete. I have been training for over 12 years. I've been coaching people for about, 8 of those, 9 of those. And so, the question is, okay, I've trained a lot of people, right? Like I've worked with hundreds of people over the course of my career. Have I, seen somebody who trains like that? And the answer is basically no. I have worked with hundreds of clients, and I have had some clients who come to me, and usually they're young guys, and they say, I can train 7 days a week. I want you to hit me with everything you've got. I need a challenge. Boom, just do it. And I say, sure thing. And I go ahead and I rate them up 6 or 7 days a week of workouts. And I've never had one actually stick to that schedule. I have had plenty of people say that they'll stick to that schedule, and then the reality is that they maybe only train 4 or 5, sometimes 6 days a week. I've never seen someone that consistently trains 7 days a week. I think I've had maybe one person who kind of consistently trains 6 days a week, but not really. And most people who say that they can train that much don't. Like, they really accurately, really more likely train 4 or 5 days a week, and they just think that they train more because they want to, again, remember themselves a little bit better in their mind than they actually are. So kind of the range that I typically see when working with clients is that I will have certain clients who, maybe they don't have super intense goals, or maybe they're just sort of time restricted in terms of how much effort they can put into this. And so, they just want to get healthy. They're not looking to become, an athlete or anything like that. And they maybe train 2 or 3 days a week. They get okay results with that. That's great for them. Most of my clients are on something like a 4-day-a-week schedule. That's kind of a solid number of days. You get 3 days off, and you can see good results without having to spend all of your time training. That's what I would say is sort of the most common. Sometimes people will train 5 days a week. Sometimes it'll be like, oh, I gave you 4 days a week and like an optional 5th day that's a bit lighter. And so, they sort of, okay, sometimes they hit the 5th day and sometimes they don't. I think that's a lot more common. Some people do train 5 days a week pretty consistently. But that's where it is. How long do they train per workout? So realistically, most people only train about an hour to an hour and a half at a time when it comes to lifting workouts. And so, could you train longer? Yes, absolutely. Could you train more days a week? Yes, absolutely. But at the end of the day, again, it's a question of what are you used to in the past? How much training have you done in the past? Are you someone who adapts really well to exercise and recovers really quickly and doesn't need to worry about, just feeling beat up all the time? Or are you someone who, you train and it hurts for days and everything sucks and it takes a while to really adapt to everything? Everyone sort of progresses at their own pace. And so, yes, there are cases where I've had some clients who, they were, in really great shape. They had really good genetics. They really were consistent. And so I would continually push them a little bit more and a little bit more and a little bit more. And, boom, they have pretty awesome training volume. How much do I train out personally? Well, personally, I work out about 4 days a week. And I say that with a bit of a asterisk next to it, because when I work out, I would say I work out for about 2 hours a day instead of the typical 1 to 1.5. And part of the reason for that is that I use a sort of flexible training schedule where I can sort of move my work around as I need to based on sort of what day it is and so on. And I have this tendency where I come into the gym and I just don't want to leave. My hardest part is just finding the time and the energy to get to the gym. And then once I'm at the gym, I'm like, boom, I want to do all the work. I don't want to, go home ever. I want to just, stretch it out as long as I can. And then, I train for an hour and a half, maybe 2 hours, and then I go home. Sometimes on my off days, I will do a little bit of extra work. So, I train 4 days a week, but I go for a run for maybe 20 minutes, here and there on my off days. Maybe it's an off day and I still hit kind of a light workout and just do some accessory work just because I feel good. So I do quite a bit more training than that. But, the reality is that, if I were to train 5 hours a day, 6 days a week, 7 days a week, that wouldn't happen. That just wouldn't happen, period. And I'm a person who's been training for over a decade. I've got, not the best genetics in the world, but certainly I'm above average, or, at least I'm somewhat privileged in that department. And so, I can handle a lot of training just because I've been at it for a long time and I'm gifted in that way. And that's, awesome for me. But of course, that doesn't apply to everybody. So, when you add those numbers up, right, most people, I would say, they can get sort of great results with really only about 4 to 6 hours of training a week. And again, that's about 4 days a week, about an hour to an hour and a half at a time. And, that's not a lot of time, really. If I think about all of the things that I do during my week, I spend X amount of time working, I spend X amount of time doing this, I spend X amount of time doing that. I spend way more time, trying to learn a language or trying to learn a new skill or, whatever. I spend way more time goofing around with my phone in the mornings before I wake up because it takes me a long time to wake up in the mornings. So, it's really not that much time when you think about it overall. But it's sort of the process of, my previous videos, I've talked about how it's more the process. It's about continual adaptation. It's about continual effort. It's about consistency and continuing to provoke further stimulus and continuing to adapt over a long period of time versus just hitting it super hard on one day and then burning out and not being able to come back the next day. And so, sort of another piece of evidence that I want to bring into this whole discussion is a study, which I think is one of my favorite studies, honestly, because I think it breaks down a lot of myths about the way that we think, how much we think people actually work out. So I'm going to pull that study up now. Okay, so this study is entitled Protein Overfeeding is Associated with Improved Lipid and Anthropometric Profile, thus lower malondialdehyde levels in resistance-trained athletes. First off the bat, basically this study was not trying to, basically talk about how much people work out. That wasn't really the main focus of this. Essentially, this is a Brazilian study. The idea here is that they were going to take a bunch of Brazilian natural bodybuilders, basically, competitors, the people who were, pretty serious at this, good at what they do and so on. And just to figure out basically, to sort them into who ate more protein generally and who ate less protein generally, and figure out just sort of what differences there were between the two groups. So the idea here was basically just to say, okay, does eating a lot more protein than you need actually still have some benefit? And, the answer is kind of, sort of. It's, a whole other thing, and we're not really going to get into that now. But basically, something that I found really interesting about this study is that they did gather data as well about a lot of other things. So in here you can see table 1, and in table 1 it basically says, a lot of other stats about them: age, height, weight, body mass index, body fat percentage, fat mass, so on. And probably the most interesting part to me is this training characteristics section at the bottom. Experience in training, years. So this is, about 10 to 11 years, plus or minus a couple years for most of these lifters. So we're talking, again, people who've been training for a very long period of time. Like, again, people who are probably good at what they do, probably have good genetics for what they do, and have been training for at least about 10 years or so. And experience in bodybuilding, years. Again, about 5 years, plus or minus a bit. So, pretty experienced at what they do, again. Days per week that they train. This is the most interesting part to me. Somewhere between, for most people, about 4 and 5.5 is the numbers here. And what that means is that basically none of them train 6 days a week. None of them train 7 days a week. All of them train somewhere between 4 and 6 days a week, but not like completely 6 days a week every week consistently. So again, these people were training about 4 or 5 days a week, which falls pretty much in line with, again, sort of my personal observations with my clients. Secondly, minutes per day. 66 minutes plus or minus, 16 minutes for the lower protein group, 58 minutes plus or minus 10 minutes for the higher protein group. So again, these people are training about an hour, a little bit more, maybe an hour and a half, maybe a little bit less. Minutes per week. That's basically just the days per week multiplied by the minutes per day. So you're looking at, 325, 260, plus or minus a bit. So again, they took a bunch of these bodybuilders, about 20 of them, I believe, is the total. And all of these bodybuilders were analyzed for all these characteristics. And again, these are competitive, serious bodybuilders who are good at what they do, who have a lot of experience, and they do not train 6 or 7 days a week, period. They do not train more than about, again, 300. So, if we took the absolute outlier, it would be about 410 minutes, which is about, what's math, 7 hours? 7 hours a week, which, again, is really not that much time when you think about it. A full-time job is 40 hours a week. Part-time job is anything above, about 10 to 15 hours a week. 7 hours a week to be in awesome shape is a great deal. It really isn't that much time when you think about it. And, so why do we have this idea that everyone trains for, 4 hours a day, for 5 hours a day, for 6 days a week, for 7 days a week? The reality, I think, is that people don't actually do that. I will say that there are some people, yes, there are some elite athletes in some sports who do that sort of thing. But if you are just looking to be good at lifting, if you are looking to get stronger, if you are looking to get bigger, the reality is that you don't have to work out that much. You really do not. You just need to work out smart. You need to have a solid approach to your dietary plan, and that's really it. I cannot emphasize enough how it's not about working a ton. It's about working consistently over a long period of time. And so videos like this Arnold Schwarzenegger video, I think that sometimes they do more harm than good. Because on the one hand, they can be very interesting, they can be very exciting, they can pump us up, they can give us motivation, they can get us into the gym, right? But then we have that nagging feeling in the back of our heads that says, okay, why am I not like Arnold? Why am I not as passionate as Arnold? Why am I not as good as Arnold? Why am I not training 5 hours a day? Why am I not training 7 days a week? Why am I finding it hard to train after my desk job or whatever when Arnold Schwarzenegger could do it after his construction job where he had to do all this physical labor all day? I'll tell you, I've worked out consistently through a phase when I was doing a physical labor job. I was delivering fitness equipment to people's houses. I would often have to carry a 600-pound treadmill up some rich people's stairs. And I still worked out throughout that whole phase. I certainly did not work out 5 hours a day. It would have killed me. And I will also add that I had to be very careful about the way that I structured my workouts so that, if I was done one day, I had to make sure that my workout was not going to impact what I was going to need to do at work the next day. So I had to sort of limit how much I could actually work out. And, the idea that I could have worked out for 5 hours a day on top of all that, and I could have just slept less, which I was already sleeping pretty crappy at the time, is like, it's just like, no. Like, that was the most stressful phase of my life. It sucked. I'm never going to do it again. And the idea that I should be encouraging people to do things like that is awful. It's quite awful. It's a bit irresponsible, honestly. And so, when I see things like this, where it's basically, I did X, Y, Z, why can't you? Well, the answer is because you're not him. Like, that's the real honest truth here, right? You're not him. You shouldn't be trying to model yourself and your approach and your plan based solely on what other people are doing, because that's not going to work out for you. That's a quick ticket to ruining yourself. You need to find a way to make your plan work for you. You need to find a way to make a plan that works for you and that you can continue to adapt and improve over time, versus trying to copy somebody else, versus thinking that you have to overwork yourself just because someone else said that that's how they succeeded. Everyone succeeds on their own, at their own pace, at their own rate. It's quite silly to try and model yourself off of someone like Arnold Schwarzenegger, who, again, by definition, is one of the best people in the world at what he did. Like, he had some of the best genetics in the world. And, you shouldn't base what you should do based on what the best person in the world at this sport is doing. Because, of course, they're going to train different than you. Like, of course they're going to, obviously, right? And you shouldn't be trying to mimic that. You shouldn't be trying to grind yourself into dust just because you think that that's what's going to get you results. So, I've gotten a little bit more mad than I thought I would, I guess, today. I just want to, again, people can brag about, people can say whatever they want and no one's going to fact check you. No one knows how much time you spend in the gym. No one knows, I've been saying all this stuff in this episode about how much time I spent in the gym. No one knows if that's true. Like, I can say it, maybe you believe me, maybe you don't. I don't care, right? But when people go around saying things like this, it sets a bad example for everybody else. Because the reality is that we don't actually train that much. We really don't. Like, I don't know how to emphasize this enough. Like, I trained all through college, and I trained more than I do now, and I still had a healthy social life. I still played World of Warcraft incessantly, and I raided, and I, beat the Lich King and all that crap. Like, I did that, right? Like, I had other things in my life. You don't have to eat, sleep, and breathe the gym. Like, you don't, like, it doesn't have to be the only thing in your brain. Your brain is not like a box that you can just put, weights in, and then boom, like, that's it. That's all that's in your brain. Like, you have other things you can do. Like, have other hobbies. Get outside, go for a walk, like, go bird watching, like, learn how to play guitar. I don't care. Point is, don't just work out all the time. Like, that's not the recipe for success. Again, unless, maybe you're like a runner. If you're a marathon runner, then okay, yeah, you gotta run a lot. Okay, fine. But if you're looking to get bigger, if you're looking to build muscle, if you're looking to get stronger, like, no. You do not need to train that much, honestly, you don't. So, that's it for today. I'm a little bit heated, sorry. That's it for today. As always, like, comment, share, tell me what you want to see in future videos. Shoot me an email, give me some feedback. Tell me if you think this sucked. Tell me if you want to see more of this, whatever. Yeah. Have a good day.